Before I read the quote and everything, I think it's a good idea to be kind of talking about. We left off on page 77, and it was a good kind of spot to leave off on in the history of the Theosophical Movement. Because we're right about to kind of start with not battles, but some disputes with a lot of the local missionaries, Christian missionaries, and the Jesuit movement, of course, because they feel like they had been in India a lot longer than Theosophy, and they beat them and to punish him. Theosophy was doing something that actively was hurting their efforts, re-inspiring this spiritual lineage and history and of the Vedas in India. So it's kind of where we're going to be starting out. I'll read the quote from today. It's a really good one. In the little HPB quote book, July 14th, yes. Again, from a lot of these are from Voice to Silence, which is good because I've not recently realized, but that's one of the books that I definitely, people are just kind of interested a bit, but don't want to dive into a really big book. Like, I think the Voices of Silence just consistently enchants everyone, like I exposed to,
Yeah, it's good because it gives kind of in poetic form it's written, and it gives a description of states of consciousness in meditation that is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's straightforward. It's not saying it's easy, but when you read it and reread it, then it kind of gets a deeper depth. But it's a really good book.
And I just would I wondered at first when I started going around twice books or these little tiny long-sized things and find out. If I go out to something that I know, like if I go out to a comedy show or a performance, they're very well sit down time because a lot of times places say show starts 8, it's not really till 9:30 or 10, and I'll just get out my little book and sit there, and it's great. It's super nice to just have that with you. So one is from the Voice of Silence, page 32. Think not that breaking bone, that rending flesh and muscle unites thee to thy silent self. Think not that when the sins of thy gross form, O victim of thy shadows, thy duty is accomplished by nature and by man. That one, I think there's so much in there. I mean, it starts with what we've been talking about with some aesthetics, mortification, and especially like the flagellation amongst Christian monks, things like that. Like, don't think because you destroyed your body and conquered pain or whatever, like that you ascended, that you know who you truly are. Like that, it might be a component, but it is interesting. Like, I've thought about this, like, especially, I'm sure they were seeing this in India, and I bet you can, like, today when you go to these places, but like, when we study, like, the Vedas, when we study Hinduism, we study Buddhism, we're not really studying these texts that are promoting that kind of extreme, like material spiritualism, right? Like the mortification, the self-immolation. Like, I wonder what they're reading or where.
Well, I think it's because so much is commentaries that people really focus on because the original text is difficult or they're not getting the meaning of it. And I think that statement about rending flesh and stuff is a very peculiar thing because obviously it happened. There's yogis that will take bamboo and just push it through their skin, and all different kinds of things like that. The Sufis with all their piercings and stuff. But it's such an opposite idea because the whole idea with Theosophy is that you're responsible for the lives of your body. Not to treat it like you need to get Botox today, but to treat it the same way that people are trying to do with animals that are going to be put to slaughter.
Yeah.
It's like, give them a life that is not stressful, because eventually you're going to eat it.
Mhm.
And in the meantime, you want that animal to have a really nice life. And in the same sense, you know, all the lives that make up our body, the bacteria, the viruses, all that stuff is influenced by our attitudes and our emotions.
Mhm.
Not just from the,
And like science is like literally every month it feels like now coming up with more
exactly.
exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, remember growing up in like the late, I mean, you were even, but like I grew up in like late 80s and 90s. They were barely starting to talk about the long-term effects of like micro traumas or everyday kind of traumas that, I mean, up until then, my parents,
yeah,
there was some traumas
yeah,
and they went through way more.
yeah. So I think that's an important thing is like, if you're trying to raise your consciousness, how would you act if you were God? Because in reality, you are the God of all the lives that are keeping you going. And that atmosphere is affecting everyone else outside of you. And so that's the thing. It's like, yeah, you can get over physical pain, but you've missed the point, is what they're saying in there. You have to be able to realize that the mind is a generator of pleasure and pain, of emancipation from this world, to bring that information back to this world. It's not like you raise your consciousness so you can leave and not have to deal with the rest of the planet. You raise your consciousness so that you're in a aware state to know really what your place in the world is.
Yeah, it brings to mind, and like that's like a really cool intuitive perspective on the Quan Yin. We have this Quan Yin everywhere, you know, like I should not receive salvation or enlightenment alone, but for the benefit with all sentient beings, all conscious beings, like our body and our vehicle being included in that. Like,
Yeah.
it's really cool. It's you because you tend to read it and you think of it as like, you know, all the bunnies and nature and stuff like that, but it's not just that. Like,
And it's like what Judge said when we were reading, you know, about the difference of Hatha yoga and Raja yoga, and if you're focusing on these bodily mortifications, you know, that's gonna end when this physical life
yeah.
and it's not gonna carry over like
It gets
Raja
impressive.
yoga.
Definitely. And like there's something, you know, as far as willpower and something, and it's amazing. But I think that's my main hang up with it, is that it's like, well, it seems like it's so body focused that once your body's gone, that's it. That kind of path is over, you know. Because yeah, and like I don't know who would want to carry on multiple lifetimes of continuity of doing that kind of stuff to your ooh, that's hard to imagine.
A lot of the terminology, like when you mentioned self immolation or mortification, is more like in your mind. We have to do that in our mind, not so much with the physical. Wow. We have to what's not out of mortify or my ideas, you know, the thoughts or things that I have about other people and other things. That's what I need to transform. You know, we use sometimes mortification or immolation, but you can say you can transform them.
Yeah.
Alchemy is science.
Yeah.
We use alchemy. So you transform everything, you're transforming in your body, you're transforming the sevenfold constitution, you know, that we speak about. There's nothing in the objective world that does not affect the subjective.
Yeah.
So everything you think and do, and you can materialize, the opposite is true too.
Yeah.
You can change that and change everything. So it is multiplication of self-immolation, really, from the point of view of the mind.
Yeah.
And that way, you don't fall into any practices of the hatha yoga.
And it is exactly related to what we talked about earlier too, about like, can't really cage the mind. You can't really, regardless of your external circumstances, you can work on things internally. And like, yeah, that's
And that's one of the objects of the works of the science. Because they're giving you the tools.
That's what I was thinking,
through
yeah,
that, and then that happens
right.
through the paramitas.
And the perspective, like you were talking about, is so important. I was yesterday, I had kind of stressful weekend, so yesterday I had a really long conversation with my Buddhist friend Tim on the East Coast, just an amazing scholar and stuff. And we were talking about, he keeps bringing up, like, you know, you can, these things that you're looking at negatively in your life, you need to do what, like we talked about in Dzogchen, where they bring up you know, there's an antidote for every poison. They have all the poisons of like anger, jealousy, avarice, all these things, and then there's the antidote. And he just kind of reminded me to remember like that like it's a matter of perspective as well, but there are some things that are objectively unpleasant and probably not good, but at the same time, there's something to be gleaned from it. There's some kind of value. And so, yeah, it was that's great, because that's exactly what we were talking about, the poisons and the antidotes. And he was talking about like also like how a lot of Hindus will do like the meditations through, like, basically as the perspective of Kali, like this goddess of destruction and things like that. And it's like, you know, it's to kind of clear away stuff of what's going on right now, just chop it all up. And like, and it's, you know, it's a big reason why the idea of elementals really stuck with me and made such sense when I got to it, because it's like the idea of Kali being like an actual thinking, acting, progressing God or someone on the karmic wheel, to me is like that makes those meditations where you're like inhabiting them a little bit riskier, maybe, or psychically risky, I would think. Yeah. What were you gonna say?
I forgot.
Yeah, that's what happens to me every time. So yeah, we'll get started from where we left off. We were just kind of talking about before, like we had talked about some of the current politics that were going on, not in India, but just the whole world. Blavatsky's opinions on kind of missionary work and like political events and happenings at the time, which we know nothing about. It's not going on in our world at all. But man, and so she talked about socialism and things like that, and so. And that's an incredible thing that we keep reminding. I mean, like every character that comes into this story is like a piece of Indian history.
Right.
It's wild how influential the Theosophical Society at this point was, and it was still a baby. And it was just like, I mean, they were extremely influential to the point that like the Jesuit, you know, Christians were really, they brought in a reverend literally on a mission to destroy the Theosophists, to like hurt their credibility with the locals, and it didn't work, and he got basically kicked out of the city or something like that. It's pretty amazing. But so yeah, we'll start with kind of that idea. We're on page 77. I just want to read kind of most of this page, so I'll start off here. The headline, of course, is Attitude of Missionaries. So Blavatsky, she, of course, was outspoken in her condemnation of all attempts to pervert the Hindus from their ancestral religion, regarding them as an impudent invasion of the personal affairs of the Indian people, meaning missionaries. The attitude of hers towards the Christians, as well as her great reverence for the Vedic philosophy of India, naturally increased her popularity with learned Hindus, whom the missionaries had never been able to affect at all. This book also, it brings up multiple times some of these scholars and people that were joining the Theosophical Movement, also, you know, very devout Hindus and scholars of their own right. The missionaries were never able to really get these guys to talk to them. Right. Like I mean, we'll get to a point pretty soon with these two Brahmin fellows that come into her circle. And T. Savarodo, I believe, he was infamous for like basically just not talking to white people. And I mean, and he turned out to just be this bastion of theological, just he was like an encyclopedia of Hindu fundamentalists.
Right.
Have this perspective. We'll talk.
It's like that, he was a high scholar
Yeah.
of the Hindu
Right.
tradition.
And he was, and to the end, falls into a certain, a common trap that very accomplished intellectuals sometimes do with, some egotism and some things like that, I mean, even Blavatsky suffers from, so we all do. So,
And she quotes him a lot, no?
yeah.
He's in a row because he was a Advaita Vedanta
Mhm.
student. And so he was really well educated and knowledgeable just on his system.
Mhm. Yeah.
In fact, the very first secret doctrine written by Blavatsky, it was sent to him because he was supposed to help her. And then after he saw everything that she was revealing, he refused.
Mhm.
And then he didn't want to help. And nonetheless, she's always quoting him everywhere because he had really good quotes about understanding the Vedanta.
Well, it's super cool to see that because he felt like he was right in line with Theosophy. It seems like until that same thing that we always go back to, that septenary nature, the sevenfold man. He was that part he just could not, because he had this very fundamental link that already said there was 4 or 5, and he just couldn't come to terms with it.
He was supposed to accept false.
Yeah.
Constitution, because they have their own
Mhm.
constitution,
Which
the Advaita Vedanta constitution,
which she gives in the secret doctrine. She
Exactly.
compares the two in a chart.
Oh,
Yeah.
she
awesome.
compares
Yeah.
3, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen that part.
She compares the Taraka, Raja Yoga, the Vedantic, and the
Theosophic.
Theosophical, yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Or
like
she'll
3,
call
5, and
She
7.
called it very good, yeah.
The Himalayan system.
Yeah.
Wow.
Trans-Himalayan.
Yeah.
That's in the secret doctrine.
So yeah, some believe in like the 3 folds, some the 5 folds.
And they're extremely strict to it, like very.
So she was explaining that really, in essence, there's no difference.
Yeah.
Once exposed, then each system has its own constitution to present, to
In fact, it's still religion.
And she makes the comparison between the 3.
Mhm.
And when you study it as Theosophy, it just makes sense.
Yeah.
So by, you're a Brahman, you might attach to your Brahman, system. And because, in the back in the days, a lot of people used to do their, what is it called? I forgot.
The rituals.
The rituals, and they used to have, they were
Like puja or something.
No, that's part of the ritual.
Yeah, and there's also, the difference too that I was finding is it comes down to dogma as well. These Vedic traditions and these Hindu traditions, they're still religions and they have dogma. And there, a lot of these traditions that they were steeped in, it was a requirement sticking to that 5-fold, 6-fold thing is dogma. It's a requirement of being a member of the organization. In Theosophy, no one's going to send you home because you don't buy the 7-fold nature of man. Like, no, it's fine.
Well, because it's different in that they're giving you this system and you either use it or don't use it.
Right.
They're saying this is a certain path, and that's the thing. So,
And it's on page 157. You'll see that table there.
Oh, cool.
The comparison.
volume 1.
So she compares the esoteric Buddhism, which is one we take, Vedantic classification, and the Taraka Raja Yoga.
Mm.
And the Taraka Raja Yoga only has like 1, 2, 3, 4 places. The Vedantic 5, and we have 7. But she explains then, why.
Mm.
Each one has different.
No, yeah, that's one of those pages that should be like constantly referred to, kind of like 200.
Right.
I wasn't even aware of that. Learn something new every day. For guys that just joined us, we kind of just got started into the book, page 77, talking about some rows between Theosophists and some local missionaries. And then, but we're about to get in, things go nuts from here. It gets, history of theosophy is a million miles an hour from here, it feels like every page, a lot happens. And so, yeah, we were just talking about how, I'll wait until we get to him in the actual lesson.
What page?
Um,
Lucifer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're on page 77.
yeah, I have some idea. When I start to read or read this kind of book, okay, about the history, it's like a one writing is listening what will be happening. It's like um, Einstein said, God doesn't play with dice.
Dice.
Oh, yeah.
Because everything we're reading here is like every detail is because say about the year, okay? This one they say about the year is the progressive, but everything is no coincidence.
Sure.
They have to have some reason to have it. That's what I remember. The God doesn't play with the
Dice.
dice.
No.
It's exactly this one.
It's not luck.
No,
It's
Well,
not
probably
luck. It's a plan.
yeah, it's a plan.
You're,
It's a plan.
Yeah.
We have to keep chismología universal, ¿cómo se diría? It's like
Universal gossip.
Oh,
yes, because if we're written like that, it's not like in my mind, it's like a being in the corner. It's not, it's more open.
right.
It's more open and don't have to think this one is for coincidence. For example, the missionary, columns, the columns. Yeah, also that one. And also they say about, hold on. I did my job. It's about, okay, Damodar and Subaron,
Mhm.
because this one, so is Subaron. Subaron, they have the same master, right?
yeah.
That is the same master.
Just, yeah.
And I was listening somebody say, why Subaron doesn't want give it the sevenfold division? They give it so this is bad interpretation because who gave it the sevenfold division was the master K.H.
Yeah.
to Sinet.
Yeah.
It's the master giver for some reason. And the difference is for the Vedantismo. The Vedantismo? Yeah, the Vedantismo. That's it, one thing. And also, I'm going to.
That's what we were just talking about.
Yeah,
the
we-
diff-
Yeah,
the
that's what we were
difference.
We're talking about
Yeah.
Okay.
that. How did you know?
Good timing.
Yeah, and also with the incident for the Kittle.
Oh, we get to that, yeah.
Okay.
Fatal incident?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
The incident,
But we haven't read that.
no.
We're about to get
It's
coming.
only yeah, because that one is exactly the master give it to us in the Akasha record because is the difference, I speak too loud, is the difference between,
You can speak loudly.
You can speak loud.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay, is the difference from the astral view and the Akasha view. It's like, remember with the concentration, we say we have to go through, we only have to pass that level. Because the level is very attraction. It's like a iman, ¿cómo se dice? Magnet. Thank you so much. Okay, and also, I have it very, a lot of coincidence. If we read the letter number 59, I have it here, the 59 letter is a little, it's a big one.
Mhm.
In that 59 letter, they say the master to Mr. Crook.
Crooks.
Okay, they say, you better to read Theosophy from July. And then I went there. What is what? Chelas and chelas like.
Oh, nice.
I said, my goodness. I found it. What is that reason? No. It's
Yeah.
not coincidence.
No, it's a synchronicity.
I'm sorry.
You're in tune.
In tune, yeah.
Yes, it is because they say, excuse me, okay? Because we need to acknowledge the different why the master give it to us. We need to read about. And also in the same letter, they talk about the devachan, the devachan, nirvana, and some help. ¿Cómo se dice what help? And some book they say about the devachan and the nirvana. So I feeling like the master letter, Madame Blavatsky, the movement of the Theosophy, they take it from here. They take it from the master letter. Because it's too many information, and then we are rompecabezas, ¿cómo se dice rompecabezas? Puzzle. Thank you. You are on the line. Yeah, if we have it, because it's a puzzle here, they give you too many details. If we zoom in on the ocean, it's too many details on that. And also, if we go
Well,
back.
the reason why he gives all those details in the letter is because you have to remember those letters that he wrote to Sinet, they were sending him questions. He was trying to teach them, like we're doing a class, we're going to do a subject. So while he's writing his letter to explain the subject that they talked about last week, he's picking up in his mind all the noise that is going on around HPB, Sinet, and his people. So he'll write a letter to address what we talked last week. But already he knows what you're talking about now. So then in that letter, he's got to explain what he's going to get the questions for maybe 3 weeks later, because it's the mail. But he's not just relying on the mail. He's in tune with the plane of mind. And you said about the puzzle. Before you guys came in, Justin was talking about how interesting at this one time so many things were happening in India between the Christians, between the politicians, between the Hindus, and Madame Blavatsky. And so all those different people, it was a very important part of time for history, because after this, India gets its freedom from England. So it's politically important, it's religiously important, and the Theosophical movement is very small at the time. But your point about the master being above all the different bickering and all the puzzles, he's trying to keep it from everything just exploding and nothing happening. There's a plan, but everyone around in all the different groups, they have their own plan. The missionaries are trying to stop HPB because HPB is helping the Brahmins and the Indians say, wait a minute, we don't need your religion, we have our religion. And she's trying to point out the truths in that. So before you walked in, he's pointing out how Subaru wouldn't talk to any white people before HPB. But then when he saw what she was trying to do, he worked. And so he was a Brahmin from the, like, very educated Brahmin from that caste system, but also from that tradition. So when the masters are giving HPB the sevenfold constitution, and she's explaining it in the secret doctrine, Roberto was saying, you know, she wrote the secret doctrine and Subaru was supposed to go through it and help. But when he saw that, he didn't want to work on it anymore because she had given an esoteric interpretation that Brahmins weren't teaching. So he felt she was giving away the esoteric side of their teachings. but she was only doing what the masters told her to write, because the masters saw that the Brahmins were holding the information and it was only kept among their class,
It's more group.
a small group.
Yeah.
And that small group had wealth and power and respect.
There's a difference between Severo and Damodar too. They
Yeah.
had different opinions on being a Brahmin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's all these puzzle pieces, but in the middle of all that, why when you read in one of the letters of the Mahatma letters, it seems like they're talking about multiple things. And yeah, some of the letters are like 8-9 pages long because they know all the drama that's going on and they're trying to put out fires before they even get the letters that are going to explain, because they're already connected on the mind plane. And so as students, when we can see that, like you did your homework, because we started in one article, and then you went to the Theosophists, and then from there you went to the Mahatma letters that all coincided at the same time. So you're putting the pieces together to understand the situation, which is what we all are trying to do. The thing to keep in mind is that they're working with the people that can change society for the better, in spite of all their bad characteristics, in spite of where they're from, because he worked with English people. You know, Sinet was an English person. He worked with Brahmins. He worked with politicians. And so that's the thing. We all got to kind of keep in mind is that everyone has a place in the puzzle. It's just understanding how you can benefit the situation in that little storm that's happening. So yeah, once we read some, it'll be interesting to see like all the craziness that happened at this time.
This book has an interesting way of mentioning big events and then not getting to them for like 5 pages. It'll because right here it mentions that the things kind of the animosity of the Christian missionaries kind of continues.
What page is that?
77. And it and it culminates in the Coulomb Conspiracy. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I've only read it. In which I mean a lot of Theosophists that have studied history were very familiar with this, because it was a very damaging blow, and it turned out to be. But it shows you how powerful the Christian church was at the time in the realm of like science, or like being an authority on what's real and what's not.
But see, that's the thing. We're talking about over 100 years ago, and that's going.
150 or
Yeah, and that's going on right now.
Oh yeah.
We have in our government in modern times a big branch of the Christian church trying to teach Christianity in public schools, which the Constitution set up as not doable.
Only forbids, yeah.
Because it set it up that way, because if you were from Europe, the fighting was between royals of different religions. And the way that the countries got bigger was getting wealthy people to become a priest, so that all the inheritance would go to the church and expand that way. And it's still going on. If we look to the Middle East, it's arguments among Muslims.
It's not Shia thing is.
Yeah, it's different branches of Muslim. And so, Christianity, which Christianity are we talking about? Protestant Christianity or Catholic? Because that was why England started their own Church of England.
Yeah.
Because it was the Pope backing a military to take over a certain country.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's no matter what we're talking about, it's still going on. So that's why it's important to understand the importance of not enforcing religion as a political tool in any country, because it causes more trouble.
Yeah.
You should be able to study Buddhism, no matter if you're Chinese or American or Colombian. But that doesn't mean that the government has to tell you have to study Buddhism. There's a big difference. And that's what was happening in India. because you had a long established educated class that was religious based with their own traditions. And then you had a powerful country that was religious based that had a different tradition. So the way to change any other civilization is to get rid of their own civilization.
Oh, yeah.
That's how you change. So by getting rid of the traditions and the teachings of the Brahmins and making people Christian, and then the wealthy people could go to England to get educated and learn how the English do it, and then go back to India and run India like an English country. Which sounds, convoluted, but that's what happened. It's no different. It's no different than what's going on in Ukraine. And they have the same religion. But you have a country trying to wipe out their own culture, their buildings, their schools, the way that they practice that religion that is the same religion. And so we think that we're separated from those kind of times because we live in the United States. It's happening right around us.
And even this country might be very different in here. Who
Yeah.
knows? There's
And
a-
that's, and
But the thing about it is that the Coulomb Conspiracy didn't overtake, Theosophy, continued.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine if, and imagine if the missionaries, if they didn't, challenge the missionaries and if that actually, if the,
Yeah.
the Vedantic Hindus
Well-
went away, then, but it didn't, Theosophy prevailed, so.
When doing research for this, I also read that like a very common British practice at the time, which again is brilliant to bring Indians to your side, was they would give opportunity for education among some of the lower castes that have never been able to do
Right.
that without British occupation. And so and they're able to, give an untouchable college education. You've got a guy that loves the British Empire forever, like, because everything bad in his life has been because of the caste system, So, it's diabolical, but it worked like a charm.
And that's the thing that we have to realize is that it wasn't all like one evil empire against another benevolent empire.
Yeah.
There was a whole wisdom tradition that was being hoarded. And they were using that to not let people advance. So if you were born into the business class, it was good, but you couldn't be a Brahmin.
You're not going anywhere.
You could, be a really good business person and you can make money. If you're born into the servant class, you're never going to be a business person. You can't start your own maid service and have everybody doing the maids. You can't, because that's a business. You can work as a maid. And see, that's the thing, that certain caste system was a way to keep people trapped and not let them move up. You don't educate them. You can't get education because you're not smart enough to absorb the education.
Yeah.
Supposed to.
Yeah. And that's the thing. So, when we look at the wide perspective, like you did before you came to class, you see that there's a lot of stuff that the masters are trying to guide in all these little pieces. Some pieces have to be broken and some pieces have to come together that shouldn't really come together, but they do. And because of it, years later, Gandhi's able to get the country as independent from England.
And so a lot of it, like, found seeds in the over. So next, we're gonna move on a little bit before we get to the conspiracy. And I don't know how much time we'll even spend on that because a lot of people, you can study it on your own forever, but it just kind of depends on how we feel. From here, they kind of finally established Adyar as the headquarters for the TS. They've been bounced around India a little bit. And so during there's a few years of some traveling and some adventures where there's a great book called From the Caves and Jungles of Hindustan which I think we even have some new copies if someone wanted to buy, or you can find it online as well. And it's pretty cool.
We have copies here too.
Yeah. I've read like 3 chapters. There's an older one downstairs, but yeah, it's pretty cool. It's very narrative based, different than a lot of the other things. So,
Cause I think a lot of those stories were to go to like published in like travel magazines.
yeah, it was said as
Like-
originally appearing in a Russian newspaper as like
Right,
in
yeah.
pieces. Yeah.
Yeah.
As like,
That's like an explorer.
yeah, and I mean, and that's the thing. We hear she says often that like the only money I make is through my publications, and then there were certain ones like that probably made her some good money. It's a nice little venture story. And so at this point as well, this is where also Alcott really starts coming into his own as what he's going to be. We've kind of talked about where he ends up before, but this is really when he and Blavatsky, were known and formally acknowledged as Buddhists themselves, but they refused to adhere to any of these sects or schools. To them, it was the esoteric tradition of Buddhism, and they were Buddhists. That was that. And so that ruffled some local feathers as well with some Buddhists and things where they wanted them to, draw a line in the sand, what kind of Buddhists are. Right? Like they tell them what kind of Buddhists they are, but the Buddhists don't know about that school. They're like, that school isn't a school. And they're like, well, it's all schools. And so what happens, and this is when Alcott really starts to kind of butt heads with the Christians as well. And this is really great, interesting stuff. And I would love to read more about this if I had time with this little era in the story. I'm going to go over right here. I'll read the next part. Alcott later returned to Ceylon alone to work for a more effective education of Buddhist youth and help in raising of a national education fund. And we know already that Alcott's passion is promoting Buddhism. During his second visit, he compiled the famous now Buddhist Catechism and obtained for the succinct statement of Southern Buddhism the approval of the high priest of Sumangala of Vidyodhaya College. Alcott was stimulated to do this work by the general ignorance of Buddhism and by the absurd misrepresentations of Buddhist teachings spread by Christian zealots in Ceylon and elsewhere. He discovered about 8 out of 11 schools of the island of Ceylon were entirely in the hands of missionaries, and he wrote the catechism to help the young Buddhists cope with the false statement of these foes of their religion. And this is what they've been dealing with as long as the whole time since they've been in India is trying to reignite this amazing cultural thought and cultural, mystical tradition that has just been subjugated and just like what you said, not necessarily completely subjugated by foreigners, but subjugated by the people that wanted to keep it secret. They wanted to be the ones in control of the keys of knowledge. I mean, you find that in every faith-based system. And so people might know a little bit more than that this period than I, but what happens is the Christians in the area were very renowned for healing, for having kind of a monopoly on like healing tinctures, relics, and even things for what they considered kind of ignorant people. They are Christianity to these people, and so what they kind of say goes. And what happens as well is Alcott starts kind of becoming in his own right a mesmerist, I guess they would say, but his form of mesmerism seems to focus mainly around healing, and he would be followed by throngs of people, like almost like a scene from the Bible, like of people wanting to get healed. I mean, and he was doing this so much that eventually he got, a letter from the masters saying, you need to stop. And it wasn't the usual reason they're telling people to stop the phenomenon. They didn't tell them to stop because people get attached to phenomenon. They said, you're going to die.
Yeah.
This is killing you.
Yeah.
Like you're giving all of this energy away. You're going to burn out like a match.
Yeah, he didn't realize, like, he had, what he was basically doing with mesmerism was using his chi, they would say, to energize people that were sick. So someone is sick and it's like your car dies and so you call AAA and they jumpstart your battery. Well, he was using his own life force to do that.
Yeah.
And there's a way to do that where you don't deplete yourself, but if you do it too much, your body is just working as like a generator and sending energy into other people, and it's not revitalizing your own body.
Yeah.
So that's what they were saying. You're
And
gonna,
that's why they were telling him, they're probably like, listen, we could probably do this without, completely giving away our life force and stuff, but like, you're not on that level yet, fella. You're
Yeah.
moving a bit too fast as usual. So
Yeah.
like, pump the brakes. And did he? No, he didn't. He continued to do the healing, and he slowed down a bit. But he found ways that he found kind of loopholes to continue to do some miracles and some healing.
The other side of that, and William Kiyosaki explains that, I think in the ocean, about healing people. And that he wasn't necessarily helping humanity by healing people, because
Oh, right.
all of the illnesses are thrown up in the actual realm, all of us, that sooner or later we will have to face our problems. So healing, yes, you can heal temporarily somebody, but just says that will return,
Exactly.
in the next time, in the next life, whenever, because that's part of your karma that is there.
Mhm.
Sooner or later you have to face it.
Mhm.
But and I'm not against any of that, but a lot of Christian healing do that.
Mhm.
And it is in Theosophy, it's not considered like really doing good.
Yeah.
Humanity.
Well, and I'll add to that too, what it also does in all religions, and this is, it's almost what Blavatsky calls like heresy of it's definitely an untheosophical thing. It places a person between you and God, between you and healing, between you and salvation, health, whatever. There's a necessary other person for that. And you don't want to condition an entire culture into thinking they need a Jesus to get to heaven,
Right.
So, yeah. All right.
The key of Theosophy, I think that's called self-reliance. So you have to get away from that so you can become self-reliant.
Mhm.
You don't have to depend always on something or somebody other outside of you. We have the third object, is the psychic powers within you, agents.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, that's a great point too. When they talk about the psychic powers that are latent in us, that also means that you can deplete those psychic powers, or if there are psychic powers, there's also there is some kind of downside to it. It can't just all be glory and wonder. It can be like maybe you burn yourself out, maybe you're imprinting things that shouldn't be imprinted, or also ignorant of what's being imprinted on you. I think that's as consistent as the other. Next we're going to jump into these two famous fellas. Tanya, I want you to say something about these guys. You seem to have done your homework.
No, but let me say about,
Sure.
because you made emphasis about the psychic power.
Sure.
Psychic power. That is the power they give you to us to prove what kind the material we are doing. Because in that one, it's like is how I can say to myself. That one is very attract for this level of life. This level of life, if they give it to you the power for clairvoyance, clairvoyance, you say, oh my goodness, let me see what is the number for the lotto. Okay?
Yeah.
Give me the number for the lotto. So that one is like in the middle of the path. It's very, very careful about that one. That's what I want to say. Now about what else do you want to talk about?
We'll introduce them real quick. So now there's the Theosophy is getting very, very popular. There's similarities to the old days of the Lamasery in New York, where the Blavatsky is entertaining an endless line of people that are interested from every walk of life, every spiritual tradition, and she's entertaining them all. She's writing letters to a billion different people at a time. I mean, she's probably burning at both ends as well at this point. But she attracts two pretty influential Brahmins at the time. Would someone just like to read this part that's highlighted, and then we'll talk about these fellas, because this is a beautiful kind of the way they in this book, the way the writer talks about them.
What page?
It is 79, like the second line down, the first starts with Damodar. You want to read?
No, que no le debo.
You want to read for us, Rebecca? Do you want to read for us? Just like maybe that whole paragraph, starting with Damodar.
So Damodar gave all his energies to the service of the Theosophic cause, working early and late for the movement. In 1880, he abandoned his status in the Brahmin caste and announced his action in the Theosophists. The title, That's of India.
So this fellow Damodar, which there's not very many pictures of him, but if you guys have some time, look up some pictures of him. There's he's a pretty interesting looking fella. He's very mysterious looking. He looks almost like he's a phantom or something, but extremely influential Brahmin coming from a very respected family. And one of the first things he was inspired by Blavatsky and Theosophy to write was this caste in India, where he was literally, I mean, I can't imagine how rare it was in those days to say, you know what, I'm not really a Brahmin. I don't need to be the celestial caste in this society anymore. I mean, that's quite a lot to give up.
Yeah.
And they relate to him very much to Dutch, that he was just kind of a tireless student at the feet of his master. You know, just he would spend days and nights with Blavatsky just soaking up information. And then he would be able to sift it and through his Indian friends. And a lot of people that didn't speak English even didn't have near the education he did. And you know, he didn't really spend much time around other Brahmins from here on out in the rest of his life. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, he did a lot of service. He helped a lot.
Yeah. And there's a book downstairs. What is the famous book he wrote as well? There's a book downstairs that he wrote that's supposed to be pretty great as well. Pierre's kind of told me about it, but I don't think we got any new ones. It would probably a few older copies, but
Yeah, I've seen a couple of them. I
Yeah.
don't remember the title.
it's a Vedic kind of philosophy
There's
thing.
one also, the office.
Yeah,
It
but
used to be.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
So, and something interesting about Damodar is, I mean, he just kind of disappeared one day. He just was gone. And I mean, there's, Blavatsky was of the opinion, it says that, it's not really written anywhere, but people had asked her and she was of the opinion that he went to Tibet to literally be, you know, a direct student of the masters, which, I mean, kind of matches his character. If you, the little time he was around, seems like just a very, very purposeful monk almost. Then we're going to talk about T. Rho, and if anybody has something to say about Damodar, because I know Tanya has some good stuff on T. Rho.
Yeah, like I say about also. Let me see here, because Olco wrote on the old diary of Nick.
Old diary leaves, yeah. We've got some copies of that as well. Quite a few, actually.
Yes, it's very interesting when we start to read that one. But also about Tubarok, it's interesting because I tried to read a little bit because too many details I couldn't realize it with the Bhagavad Gita.
Mhm.
That one is and also they say here on the book, they say was too many orgulloso, ¿cómo se dice orgulloso?
Proud.
Proud, yeah. proud, the drama.
Oh, yeah, he was. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very that one. And also, in that same part of Mr. Crook, it does say, that's what the problem, because he started to, to discover too many things, but, and the opposite, the proud, too many proud,
Right.
egocentrismo, egocentrismo, you know, I am the one, I am the one. So that's one that's with the power I speak about.
Yeah.
The power they prove to us. And also they say about esoteric Artha Trans-Himalayan.
Oh, the Trans-Himalayan
Yeah,
thing?
the Trans-Himalayan.
Yeah.
That one is it's the same thing, the proud. He one thing is only he has the own knowledge. You know, and they put it like in balloon.
Yeah,
Nobody can go through to that.
Yeah.
And that's it, the difference of the purpose of the master. They want everybody having the same opportunity. That's why also in the letter 59, that also they say everybody has the opportunity to do in that one. They say ayúdame tú, Robert. This one they say in the letter 59 to say all the people, no, the really Theosophy is like tiene que ser como un labrador de abrir los surcos. Yeah, they have to be like they have to open the path for everybody.
Sure.
Okay? Okay, I'm going to translate in my own.
No, that's right. Yes.
But the thing is, they have to put the seed, okay? The seed, and they say something beautiful because sometimes the master they are poetic.
Oh, yeah.
Poetic. They say, then the naturaleza, the natural, they have to do it, the natural who has the law, they have to finish. They have to finish something like that. Ay, Roberto no me quiere ayudar. ¿Cómo se dice que, ok, en la tarea de un filósofo es como la labrador. Abrir los surcos y poner las semillas. Y luego la naturaleza hace, que es la ley, hace el final. A ver, lo repito.
Well,
The career of a theosophist is to
it's an analogy about the
plant, see, like it's like a labor.
you know, when you see the plants in the soil, you just got to be a good laborer, see the plants, and leave it there for humanity to grow.
Mhm.
Awesome. Similar to, kind of the Quan idea again. Yeah,
Right, yeah.
that's good.
Constant gardener.
He was amazing. I mean, everybody that met this guy, kind of contributing to his ego, probably was just amazed at what a brilliant scholar this guy was, and what an encyclopedia of the Vedas. But he was a very different Brahmin than Damodar, because he loved being a Brahmin. And that's why he had the education. He wouldn't have had access to the teachings he had and had mastered if it wasn't for his birth status. And so he was proud of that. But it's almost apparent that like he felt like he began to feel like he was an equal intellectually and spiritually to Walcott and HPB quite quickly. And he wasn't as reliant as some of the other students and new Theosophists on the masters. It almost seems like he almost might have felt like he was close to that level himself, because it literally came down to him kind of leading the society literally came down to the septenary nature of man. And they just could not agree on it. It came down to his side was doctrine, dogma on faith. No one's budging. He's not going to budge on it. But again, Blavatsky, hers isn't faith-based, it's truth-based. She knows this, and and just as an impressive lineage of studying things like that. So, I mean, where would Theosophy be if she would have budged at that time and been like, you know what, bro, how about inside? Let's rewrite that, change the whole secret doctrine.
Well, the thing about it was, she was bringing that information from the master.
Yeah.
And that was the difference between Damodar and Sagaro. Damodar, I think, was probably at the very minimum, very intuitive, but probably more than that.
Hmm.
And so when he, met HPB and when he worked with the masters, I think he realized the difference between learning a tradition and working with a master.
Hmm.
And I think because of his nature, that's probably why the masters brought him to Tibet.
Sure. Well, yeah.
Because the HPB really he was helping HPB a lot, and she was upset that Damodar was called by the masters because that meant she had to do more work with what the people that
Oh, yeah, he was
and the
probably,
people that were
he's a
there
great student.
were not as helpful as
Yeah,
Damodar.
yeah.
And that was the thing, she's working for the masters trying to do this, and then it's like, you take my right hand
My
man,
best
here,
guy.
my right hand judge,
But he's a
the role it's not gonna budge, and now you take my best guy.
my number one draft pick.
Yeah, it would be frustrating,
Yeah.
for any of us.
Yeah, and the nice thing about the Theosophical situation, though, is that regardless, it doesn't ever seem to have gotten too poisonous. It seems like they just kind of did go separate ways. But upon the death of Theosophical, there was there was a big write-up in the Theosophists about him, and what a great contribution. Like, I mean, Blavatsky made a very conscious effort to clear the air with his death, and it made one of the most, metropolitan magazines at the time. So, and at the same time, he was the leader of something called the Arya Samaj. Oh no, that's later. I'm sorry. But so, also what I found interesting is early on, I didn't know this. This is my first exposure to this. I guess the Trans-Himalayan Brotherhood was early on referred to as the Arhat Esoteric School. Was it a while? Huh. I've never heard that.
Well, yeah, it's called sometimes what?
Arhat Esoteric School.
Trans-Himalayan or Cis-Himalayan.
So that, yeah.
They're just,
But they're all just interchangeable, right? Okay, perfect. The next little interaction is quite interesting because it's the Theosophical Society dealing with someone that isn't like a clear rival or enemy. This isn't the spiritualists anymore. This isn't the missionaries. This is a local Swami that is extremely influential, extremely high sat. He's the leader of his own kind of fundamental sect of Hinduism called the Arya Samaj. Extremely fundamental. I mean, think like on some current religions, the really kind of fundamental movements that are. I mean, they were monotheistic, like fundamental Vedic Vedanta. It would take a lot of study for me to even really grasp that, like how it's monotheistic. But I mean, I've heard that concept before, where a Hindu would consider himself monotheistic because all of these menagerie of gods are just incarnations of the one. Yeah, so it was probably something like that. And so he kind of makes a presence. This is actually pretty good thing to read. I'll go ahead and read this just because I wouldn't be very good at explaining the differences of what's going on with this, because it's very, very Indian kind of social affairs and things. So the relationship of the Arya Samaj with the Theosophical Society, originally established while the founders of the society were in New York. So this was back in the days of the Lamasery. They were writing letters. He was one of their first connections in India, actually, this one. They continued for a time in India on much the same footing, that of sympathy and cooperation without any organic connection between the two organizations. Alcott and HPB met with, his name was Dayanand Saraswati, several occasions. They published a series of autobiographical articles by the Swami in the Theosophists and reported his public tilts with Christian missionaries in 1882. I read a couple of those, and it's exactly what it sounds like. They're articles about him like debating down local Christians. This was pretty clever. This was pretty good. In 1882, however, the leader of the Arya Samaj turned against the society, charging that its founders had renounced for Buddhism their belief in the Swami's interpretation of the nature of deity. After this attack, Alcott printed Dayanand Saraswati's own self-contradictory statements in parallel columns in the Theosophist, and the friendly alliance between the two movements was at an end. The Swami's bitterness Swami's bitterness against Theosophists seemed chiefly based on the fact they would not adopt his theological teachings derived from Hinduism, which is, if you look into the sect, extremely orthodox. I mean, it would be, for Theosophy to have this kind of relationship that he wanted, Theosophists would have been swallowed up by this. That would have been the only way. He also accused the Theosophists of forsaking the Vedas and doing no practical good for India, which, you know, the Theosophists never really claimed to be completely devoted to the Vedas.
Yeah.
When these charges became known, other numerous Hindus contributed letters to the Theosophists dissociating themselves from the strictures of the aggrieved Swami and expressing deep gratitude to the society for its labors on behalf of the Aryan philosophy. However, on the occasion of Dayanand's death in October 1883, this is what I was saying earlier, the Theosophists published a moving tribute to the memory of his life, which was spent in determined effort to clear away the superstitions which had become associated with Vedic religion. And that was, it seems like that was one of his main things. Yeah, was to get rid of the superstition and almost mysticism. He was the demystifying fellow. Today, works of reference speak of him as a forerunner of modern Indian nationalism, one who helped to check the disintegrating influences of European culture on India's educated youth. You know, today we sometimes see that word as naughty nationalism, and we see it as negative. But without Indian nationalism, I mean, there was none. You have to have some kind of local, indigenous nationalism, just pride in your home a little bit for it to be. And so, but without this rise in Indian nationalism, we wouldn't have what Colin was talking about earlier. We wouldn't have gone. We wouldn't have had any of that. Or maybe we would have, but 50, 60 years later than we did. Yeah. So yeah, does anybody have anything to share on these fellows? Please.
And also, if we can translate the time was this one was writing, the Christian missionary, they had the control, the religion there.
Yes.
And I say, oh my goodness, woman, with another country, they don't have any education, anything. They want to break. They want to break our power.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, Mr. Sinet, not Mr. Q. Mr. Sinet, the purpose want to make the bridge from the India and the England.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to take people or only they want to open the mind for the people to say, don't be a slave.
Yeah.
Don't be a slave. And that's why they put on the finger to say, oh, I was thinking you are from the Buddhists. Now you say you are not. And one of the letters of the master, they say there never was Buddhist. That's what the problem was. Mr. Sinet is wrote Buddhism with 2D, I think with the 2D. That's the main problem because they were supposed to, they are from the Buddhism religion. Yeah. And Theosophy is not any religion because religion is dogmatism.
Right.
And this one, they give you the free of our mind. We can read anything and we can put it together. Because that is the purpose of the Theosophy, to open our mind, not control the mind.
Right. Right.
And also, that's why they say here about the Arya philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Arya philosophy. And that's one that the same happened in 1883 after the died,
Mhm.
they wrote the exactly what's going on about. Um, in 1883,
Persecution.
the persecution started after the occult war.
Yeah, that occult world, it's a very controversial thing.
Yes, I will say we need to read about that book because on the master also wrote too many things about. If we take only, only in the cover, and we don't go through this one, we don't understand the reason why was to write the occult.
I agree.
Yes,
I agree.
occult world.
Yeah, I think like, I have the same mind, like, I read this history and it keeps referring to certain texts, especially things like the occult world. And like, I definitely want to read it, and I've read many theosophical, opinions that it's very valuable. It's not up there with like the main things that we kind of stick to, but like, yeah, I'd really love to know if anybody's found some good copies or cheap or something, because, and I've only seen one copy in this building, and it's, it's old and valuable.
Which one?
The occult world.
Yeah, we don't cover that.
Yeah. I don't even think it's in print anymore, but we got PDFs online, so.
Yeah. Yeah, now you find anything on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. So before we move on, we're gonna move on into like scandal territory, I guess. Does anybody have anything to share before we get into the Kittle incident and the other, yeah.
What Daniel was saying is that, because sometimes you read that the masters of Blavatsky were Buddhists, but not Buddhists from Gautama Buddha. Not that kind of Buddhists.
Right.
Buddhists from Buddhi.
Yeah.
From the wisdom religion. That's what it means by being Buddhists or Buddhists. And earlier when we were talking about this Coulomb, conspiracy against Theosophy, and it's not the first time that happens, because we were, if we go back in time, like it was mentioned that a lot of things have been happening, like any religion or any system trying to take over certain studies or philosophies. If we go back in time, almost every century, there was people killed, because they didn't agree with the same thought as the mob, or whoever was in charge. So there's always something against the theosophy, we might say. So there's always the opposite side of things. And if we go back to think about if there's something good, there's something bad, this is already hiding in the astral plane. Because the astral plane, which is the world of ideas, there's always the opposite idea there to the one idea. When Blavatsky came to give away the sevenfold constitution, that a lot of people were against it. Also, that what happens is in the astral plane, that becomes impressed. So, somebody can take that and use it against itself, or use it in a different way to hint or to try to get people to change their mind about something, saying that maybe this wasn't right or this was wrong. But the idea that when any idea is presented to the world, it's already impressed in the actual world. So you're going to find the opposite.
Yeah.
There.
I feel cliche sometimes bringing up Campbell so much, but it's like, Campbell basically took so much of this stuff and just like kind of dumbed it down for like the mass readers and everything like that. He was really good at taking these concepts you're speaking about, like, that psychic impression on an entire culture, and really just kind of making it scientifically, swallowable by a mass audience. So yeah, but again, without the precursors, you wonder what like his writings would have even been like in that entire era of philosophers. Okay, so before we move on to the riddle incident, since it's getting into some pretty heavy, not too heavy, but it's quite a bit's going to go on, and we talk about a wonderful the concept that kind of comes, one of the good things, just like what we were saying with Buddhism, it's, we can look on the bright side of supposed bad and negative events. And one of the great things that happened because of the Kittle incident was the masters and Blavatsky literally talking in detail about the process of thought transference and precipitation, what the method that the masters would sometimes use to get messages across. And so it's quite a bit of stuff. So I was thinking we go into that, or we can talk more about this septenary nature. There's this really great thing. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen this before, but just kind of, I'm wondering if have we already kind of done this to death in other classes, or is it something you think would be valuable to go over right now instead of moving on to the Kittle?
It's up to anybody.
Yeah, how do you guys feel?
You're the chair,
Yeah.
you decide.
Maybe ask one line.
Oh yeah, what do you guys think online? How you feeling? Let's move on to it. Since I already mentioned the whole thought transference thing, I guess I should just get
There's
into
Barbara.
it. Oh, there's Barbara.
Hi,
Hi,
It's just-
Barbara.
hi. I was just listening very.
Are you on mute? We can't hear you.
Texting something we want.
No, I think I took it off, but
Well, we
I'm
can go over
listening.
it shortly. I mean, the thing is, why is it important? Is setting aside the drama that happened with Subaru, the reason why it's important is because it's basically a key to understanding nature and to understanding ourselves. So if each one of those principles, everything in nature has it. Everything. And we can read through Hermetic writings and they'll say as above, so below.
Sure.
So if you apply that to the 7 principles, that means it gives you an understanding of the other terms. Like Tanya brought up the idea in the Master's Letter 59 about Devachan. Devachan is a state of consciousness after death. How do you participate in that state of consciousness? Your body's dead and disintegrated. Your astral body is gone. So what is it that is there? Your kamic nature dissipates with the astral body.
Yeah.
So what is it that is actually witnessing this semi-heaven state of consciousness? And that's why the sevenfold nature is important, because it gives you a tool to understand your own mechanics of consciousness and your physicality. So if you're talking about the astral plane, we have a mind, kama-manasic mind, that is on that plane. So if you can change your state of consciousness from physical consciousness to astral consciousness, basically what you're doing is turning the senses off. They're absorbing all the stimuli from this plane and then letting them work on the plane where they are. Because our astral senses are the true senses that we have.
Right.
But they're still just senses. They're still just lenses. The true sense is in the mind. Because whatever you hear, whether it's what everybody else hears or whether you're hearing clairaudience, it's still your mind that has to understand what you're hearing. So when you're dreaming, you hear in your dreams. People talk to you in your dreams, but they're not in your room. So what is it that hears? Your mind is listening. And that's the thing. When we go see a movie, we're seeing all this projection on the outside, but it's our external eyes that are seeing it. When we're dreaming, it's our internal sense. So when you get the sevenfold constitution, the way it's different from the one that Subaru was pointing out is that it splits mind into 2 different levels. The Vedanta one doesn't do that. You have mind, and they just assume that there's a soul mind, which is the reincarnating aspect of memory and experience and understanding. And that's your mind per se, or manas, pure manas. But that is a reflection of what is coming from below and what is coming from above.
Yeah.
So it's important, this sevenfold constitution, because the more you learn about phenomena, it gives you the tool to understand what aspect of consciousness and what aspect of sensing is aware on that plane. When we get tired, we know we've just walked 15 miles, our feet are sore, our legs are kind of tired. But who recognizes the tiredness? There's something in ourselves. Our cells are sending up a signal of being tired. They're not self-consciousness of tiredness because they don't have self-consciousness. They have consciousness, which relays that to our consciousness, which then we understand as a self-conscious feeling of being tired.
Right.
And I think that's what's important with the sevenfold constitution. So when we hear that a master can cause materialization of a letter in a place where they're not at, then we have to say, well, what is the mechanics of it? How does that actually, how could we open a door in that closet and then on an empty shelf, it's a letter that's printed if no one put it in there? And that was what we get into the Coulomb incident, because they're saying that's impossible. So someone is putting a trick letter in there and saying it just materialized, but that's not what happened.
Well, yeah, you get some jealous people involved, and you got the missionaries that are still waiting on the wings for any chink in the armor, you know?
Yeah, and they just don't believe it can happen.
Right.
So they know that she's a fake because no one can do that. And the masters didn't. They could have very easily put 50 people in a room and wrote a letter in the middle of nowhere. But they didn't, because they weren't trying to prove to skeptics of these powers, because they saw the only thing that does is get curiosity going for phenomena. But they couldn't call on a self, couldn't send a fax. What they did was create with their mind effects.
Yeah.
We have fake mechanical instruments to do what they do with their mind. And that's the difference.
Before we close, I'll actually, I want to read.
But also,
Go ahead,
let me
please.
say something. In one of the books, they say about writing with psychometry. They explain everything. They explain. I could understand only the letter A. But in another part of that one, they say writing with precipitation.
Right.
Okay, that's one is too many information. That one only the comma maybe. But what I really understand is the master explained in this plane, in the invisible world, they have all the material. But we need to, like when they say chela lipo, the first thing we have to be pure to understand that one. It's because, and also they say, one of the letters say about they stop the precipitation because they use too many energy or cheap.
Too much of their energy or chi.
Yeah, that one. Because it's and also they say sometimes they have to listen a little bell when they say psychometry. They say they have to listen like a little bell. They put it on something in the head, and the energy goes down onto the hand, and they run.
So the difference in those two things are psychometry. You're a chela. So to get to be a chela at that level, you can not think. You just, it's like when we daydream. You're trying to write a script for a movie. You're trying to think about a painting you want to paint. So what you're doing is thinking in your mind and letting the idea come in. So for psychometry, the chela and the master are tuned in. The same way on this level, if I want to dictate a letter because he's better at typing on a keyboard, so I say, okay, write this letter, and I start talking, and he's just typing it out because he hears me, and he does it. And it's the same thing with the master. The master is thinking. The chela is picking up directly those thoughts and writing. The interesting thing is, when the chela is writing the letter that the master is thinking, it comes out in the master's handwriting. So
They bring it out quite a bit, yeah.
So it's kind of a type of hypnotism, but you're not hypnotized.
You're that thought transference.
That's transference, thought transference. And they do that with the chelas because that's the way to develop so that you know at any point what the master's thinking and how we can work. A really good sports team works on thought transference.
A band, yeah, too.
A band works on thought transference because you're so tuned into each other. The football team, the quarterback is going to call a play and people move, but the other team moves. So the play's already ruined. But in the mix of it, someone goes out and the football player throws the ball to that person instead of this person. It's a very basic form of thought transference, but that's what it is. But for that to happen, like you said, there has to be a purity of intention and a purity on the chela's part to be able to even tune in to receive it. The precipitation, the master has to focus in their mind like we would focus a camera to make a photograph. The paper, they're not creating the paper. The paper is already there. Paper will be in the spot where they want to print. And they think what they want to write. And the carbon in the air impregnates into the paper. Now, to us, it sounds like, yeah, it's probably possible because we use printers. We use laser printers. And they use a bottle of color to print the paper.
Yeah.
But when you actually see the letters, the paper isn't printed just on one side.
It's part of the paper.
It's part of paper. And it's in dots. Like if you were to see a picture of someone that was a jobless painter, and they just
Oh, like a dot matrix.
like a dot matrix, but you don't see it. It looks like writing just like that.
Yeah, but like,
But when you use a magnifying glass, you can see, and it's in the fibers of the paper.
Huh.
And I only know that because I read a book. There was a guy that actually did a whole study of it, and it was this old surfer guy that used to come here.
Oh, yeah.
Get his name. Anyway, he had a book about it, and so when I was in London, I went to the London Library and you have to get a special card, and it takes almost a whole day to get a card to have the library pull these papers out from a reference.
yeah.
And then they give you white gloves to look, and you can borrow a magnifying glass. So by the time I got the papers, I only had like a half hour
Yeah,
to spend with them.
yeah.
But when you look at the magnifying glass, it's just like the guy that wrote the book about it. He shows you like the image blown up,
Yeah.
and it's impregnated into the fibers of the paper.
Huh.
And the masters used different handwriting, and it's in their handwriting. And it was in different colors sometimes.
Yeah, but again, the visualization of that is really cool. That carbon just kind of swirling around and then just almost being attracted like a magnet to just impress on. That's really cool.
But like here, I mean, we breathe, if this seems clean. But if someone didn't wipe this table down every week, when we came in, it would just be dusty with that same carbon. The difference is, it's not printed in any form. It's just gravity pulls it out of the air and it just precipitates down and we get the carbon dust from the cars.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. Basically, this thing that I'll read in the master's words, we'll close with basically the master explaining what Coulomb just kind of said, told us. I think Coulomb is more understandable. It's really complicated the way they describe it here. Let's see what's in the chat first. Oh, thanks, Rose. I agree. So in closing out, read the letter explaining a thought transference, mainly precipitation. Whether I precipitate or dictate them or write my answers myself, the difference in time saved is very minute. I have to think it over, to photograph every word and sentence carefully in my brain before it can be repeated by precipitation. As the fixing on chemically prepared surfaces of the images formed by the camera requires a previous arrangement with the focus of the object to be represented, for otherwise, as often found in bad photographs, the legs of the sitter might appear out of all proportion with the head, and so on. So we have to first arrange our sentences and impress every letter to appear on paper in our minds before it becomes fit to read. For the present, it is all I can tell you. When science will have learned more about the mystery of the lithophil or lithobiblion, and how the impress of leaves comes originally to take place on stones, then I will be able to make you better understand the process. But you may know and remember one thing: we but follow and servilely copy nature in her works. It's a great term at the end.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing to think about when he's describing that, how nature impresses the image of the leaves on a rock. Because that's the life force that is making that image on the rock.
It's your power of will. And also called Kriya Sakti.
Yeah.
If you concentrate your mind really well on something, you can have that kind of phenomenon we might see that.
It's pretty neat that he almost relates the precipitation of a letter to like a fossil. Because he says that the time doesn't matter. And so it's almost like it's taking millions of years almost for this to happen, but to him it doesn't matter.
I have one question about not the picture, the draw or the master, the pintura, not the picture, but no photograph.
Yeah.
That one was,
The
I handed.
Right.
That one was like a precipitation.
No, I think that was a drawing.
Yeah, but
I don't know.
But the master wasn't in front. Everything was in the mind.
Well, yeah, but HPV saw the master before she ever met the master.
But
No, but
No.
the portraits, the portraits,
the portrait.
they were, I guess with the help of somebody.
Oh, the masters, yeah,
Kind of
they're on here somewhere.
sort of communicated with that transparency in a way. So he did the portraits and I guess they were approved that, yeah, for now you can use that, but they're not the true portraits.
No, it's these.
Neither the names are the true names. But for that, they said, it's okay. You can have
Great. Well, thank you so much, guys. Great class. I think next time we'll kind of start where we left off with this transference and precipitation because there's a lot there. I think it's a great starting point.
So which one, the psychometry or the precipitation?
Precipitate, well, both. We'll start with the Kittle instant, which leads to the Nutella. Kittle instant. Barbara or Rose, you guys have anything to share?
I just want to say thank you very much. I learned a lot.
Yeah.
And I'd like to go deeper into some of the things. Maybe next class, that would be great.
Cool. I agree.
What subject would you like to go deeper?
Well, I think it's really interesting how you said a master and a cello communicate. So, things like that, like understanding that world.
Definitely. I think it's right where we'll start. If not next week, if someone else is taking a turn, maybe the week after is,
I'll take it.
so when we,
I was thinking what might be good to do is, in the ocean, page 60 to 69, starts talking about reincarnation. We don't have to cover the whole section.
me or something.
Yeah.
And I'll put it in the email. Yeah,
So I
so,
think that would be a way to, another like little interlude, and it would be good to.
yeah, and it'll work right back to the history, so, yeah.
And I also like the idea of the sevenfold, was it the sevenfold,
Constitution.
nature of man?
Yeah.
So,
I think we'll go over some of the diagram and
We can do that if you want, and instead, that would be a good thing, or
yeah,
I
that would be a good one. I like that, yeah.
I can discuss it in the same section of the reincarnation.
Great.
Because
Great.
That's why we don't start to get at least one part of the one letter of the master. Because it's too many information by myself. It's, oh my goodness.
Well,
I
Email me the part that you want to do.
So, this world. So, I'd be happy to participate,
yeah,
but I think it's good that we're going through this, and it's gonna take a while.
Yeah, yes.
Once in a while, something like maybe that. Perfect, you can do that, if you wanna present that.
or pick a letter.
Will you email me the part you're talking about? Yeah.
Pick the letter that you want to discuss, and then we'll discuss it.
right now, I start to work with the 59, but it's a big one.
Well, see,
Yeah,
that's
great.
yeah. We're all-
Okay, so I'll send out the email with the recording, specifically what we're doing next week. And thanks for being here, everybody, and we'll see you later.
See you next
Yeah,
week.
thanks for your input.
Thank you. It's slowly we get there, you know?
Yeah.
Don't feel overwhelmed by I hear the girl saying that she feels overwhelmed by this material. Slowly, it actually goes in and it stays there, and then it comes back and you learn more. So slowly, just have patience with it, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and it's helpful for you guys too, to like, if there are 6 aspects that you're interested in, let us know,
For sure.
The talk.
Yeah, like I mean, I'll benefit a lot from the sevenfold nature, and totally. All right, everybody, have a good night, and see you next week.
So,
Bye.
Bye.
chapter 8.
It's going to be 69 condemnation, right? Next week.
We got next week, we're gonna do sevenfold nature by Collins.
Doing